Okay, let's continue with the circulatory system. The last section of the video, we covered the main parts of the heart. So once again, make sure you're good with the main parts. Now let's look at what these specific sections do. The right atrium, okay, right atrium is going to receive oxygen poor blood from the body, which means once blood has gone to the feet and once blood has gone to the legs and gone to the pancreas and gone to the brain and gone to wherever in the body, it's carried oxygen to those body parts. Then those body parts use that oxygen. So once that's happened, now you have part of your blood that doesn't have oxygen in it anymore because it carried that oxygen to the body parts that needed it. So now you have blood that doesn't have oxygen, which means oxygen poor blood. It doesn't carry any oxygen anymore because it gave it all away. That particular blood is going to pass into the right atrium from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So blood from the brain and blood from your eyes and blood from the upper parts of your body are going to come in through the superior vena cava. This is blood that doesn't have oxygen in it anymore. And then blood from like your organs and blood from your legs that doesn't have oxygen anymore is going to come in through the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. This oxygen poor blood, doesn't contain oxygen anymore, is going to be pumped into the right ventricle. So it's going to pass through this tricuspid valve. And then the right ventricle is going to pump this blood through the pulmonary artery. So it's going to go through the pulmonary valve here, okay? And it's going to go through and out this pulmonary artery to the lungs. So blood's going to flow from the right ventricle through the pulmonary artery to the lungs where it can get more oxygen. Then the lungs, once you breathe in oxygen. Oxygen is going to enter the blood in the lungs. Then that blood is going to flow from the lungs through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. So the left atrium now has received blood that has oxygen in it from the lungs. So the pulmonary vein is going to transport that oxygen-rich blood from the lungs back to the heart, and it's going to enter the heart in the left atrium. It's going to pass through the mitral valve down into the left ventricle, and then the left ventricle is going to pump out that oxygen-rich blood, the blood that now has oxygen in it again. It's going to pump it out through the aorta to the rest of the body. So that's how the heart works. The right side of the heart is going to take in blood that doesn't have oxygen in it anymore because it gave all that oxygen to the body. It's going to pump it through the pulmonary arteries to the lungs so the blood can get oxygen back into it when you breathe in. And then that blood that is going to contain oxygen-rich blood now is going to move from the lungs through the pulmonary veins into the left side of the heart, and then the left side of the heart is going to pump that oxygen-rich blood out through the aorta to the body so the body can get oxygen again. So that is how blood flow and oxygen travels through the blood, and that's why that shows you how all of the major parts of the heart work. All right, continue on with this circulation. We have a couple different parts to our circulatory system. Okay, you have pulmonary circulation, which is the right side of the heart. I've already talked about this. Receives blood, and then the systemic from the body to the lungs, and then the systemic circulation is the left side of the heart is going to pump that blood that's holding the oxygen to the body. So you have your pulmonary circulation for the right side, then your systemic circulation for the left side. The pacemaker of the heart, okay, if you would think about a pacemaker and what it does, a pacemaker of the heart is a sinoatrial node. Okay, it's hard to say. Sinoatrial node. Okay, this sinoatrial node this sinoatrial node is kind of like the kickstart. It's the chemical impulse, the little jolt from like a battery that's going to get those muscle contractions working and getting the heart pumping this blood into different directions. So the sinoatrial node, once again, hard for me to say. All right, it's going to act as that pacemaker, act as the battery that has the juice that provides that shock or that jolt of energy to get those muscle contractions flowing. All right, as blood flows through your circulatory system, it's going to pass through three different types of blood vessels. You have arteries. The arteries, remember, we just think about what we looked at the heart. The arteries are going to carry blood from the heart to the body. Okay? The arteries are going to carry from the heart to the body. So for the arteries, all of your oxygenated blood is going to be carried except by the pulmonary artery. Your capillaries are the smallest blood vessels in the body. Extremely tiny, small blood vessels. These little capillaries are what's going to transfer nutrients and oxygen to the tissues, like to the tissue that makes up the liver, and then to the tissue that makes up the skin, and to the tissue that makes up the eyes and the brain. So these little capillaries are going to be what transfer the nutrients and oxygen to those tissues, and they're also going to be what pick up carbon dioxide and waste from the cells in those tissues. You know, remember, carbon dioxide is produced through cell respiration, and any type of byproducts, you know, like dead cell parts and dead organelles, that would be considered waste. So it's going to carry that CO2 and waste away when the cells are produce that stuff. So that's the function of the capillaries. And then your veins. Your veins are going to carry your deoxygenated or oxygen poor blood back to the heart. So if you look at our picture once again, let's go back. Here's our heart. Remember, our arteries are going to carry oxygenated blood from the heart, except the pulmonary artery. That one actually transfers that oxygen poor blood to the lungs. Okay, and then your veins are what's going to carry the oxygen poor blood back to the heart. So those are your three types of blood vessels. Okay, the cells that make up the circulatory system. You have red blood cells. Okay, the red cells that make up the color of our blood. Our blood is red. I don't care what your elementary or middle school teachers told you. They are full of it. Your red blood cells are red. Your blood is red because of the red blood cells, the iron found in those red blood cells. The iron's going to be there to help transport oxygen. Your white blood cells are going to be a part of your immune system or help your immune system in fighting infections and those pathogens that can cause disease. You have platelets found in your blood, and these platelets, these flattened plate-like structures, are going to help your blood clot when it needs to clot. If there's if there's damage done to any tissue, the clotting process is going to occur to help the healing occur, so to stop blood flow when an injury occurs. So your platelets are for that. Okay, so you have your red blood cells, white blood cells. Both are produced by bone marrow along with your platelets, and these are their functions. All right, now let's look at the respiratory system. Respiratory system is linked with the circulatory system because that's how oxygen gets into our body, and then how oxygen gets from our lungs in our body to all the other body parts. Because just because we breathe in doesn't mean our brain automatically gets oxygen. Or doesn't mean our pancreas automatically gets oxygen, or our fingers automatically gets oxygen. The blood is what's going to carry that oxygen. So the respiratory and circulatory systems are linked. Okay, your respiratory system, like I mentioned, this is where your gas exchange is going to occur. You get oxygen in for the body. And then you get rid of the carbon dioxide produced through cell respiration. Trillions of cells make up our body, and each one of those cells will go through cell respiration, and so a byproduct is carbon dioxide. How do we get rid of it? Through our lungs. So the pathway that we breathe in through our mouth or our nose, the air is going to pass through the pharynx first, then the trachea, before it makes it inside our lungs. Once it gets actually to our lungs, to the lung organ, then it's going to pass through the bronchus or the bronchi tubes, then it'll pass through the bronchial tubes, before it makes it to the alveoli. Now the alveoli is the stopping point of oxygen. Once we breathe in and it passes through all these stages, it eventually makes it to these little air-filled sacs, these alveoli, and that's where oxygen is going to enter the bloodstream and carbon dioxide is going to exit the bloodstream. And then when we exhale, the carbon dioxide goes from the alveoli backwards all the way out through the nose or mouth. All right, now how we breathe. We know we breathe in, and then our lungs will expand, and that's how we take in oxygen. But how our lungs expand is by the use of another muscle. Our lungs cannot expand and get bigger without the diaphragm, which is a flattened muscle that runs horizontally right underneath our lungs. As we breathe in, that diaphragm muscle pulls down and contracts, helping our rib cage to expand, giving more room for our lungs to expand to take in oxygen. So the diaphragm is aiding the lungs to expand to breathe in more oxygen. All right, now let's look at the digestive system. Okay, there are a lot of parts of the digestive system in this picture, but what's missing? Where does it come into the body? Through the mouth. Okay, so let's start looking at some of these parts. First of all, we know the digestive system is going to take in food and convert that food through digestion into a broken down form where we can absorb those nutrients from the food that we eat. Digestion does begin in the mouth. We've talked about this before. I know it's been a while, but when we talked about our macromolecules and our carbohydrates especially, our saliva holds enzymes. The particular enzyme in question is amylase. So when we start to eat, amylase actually starts to chemically break down certain macromolecules like carbohydrates. And then as we chew, we are mechanically breaking down that food source into smaller pieces to aid in a quicker digestive process. Once that happens, the food's going to pass through the esophagus and then move down the esophagus through a process called peristalsis. Peristalsis is where your esophagus, that tube that runs from your mouth to your stomach, is going to contract. Okay, and as it contracts, it's squeezing that food that you ate down that tube into your stomach. That's peristalsis. Once it's in the stomach, some more enzymes start to work, like pepsin. Pepsin's a big enzyme in the stomach that helps continue the digestion process. Your stomach also contains one of the strongest acids, okay, that naturally occur, which is hydrochloric acid, and that finishes off the digestive process. Okay, breaks it into a mixture of organic matter and liquids, okay, and it produces this substance called chyme. Once this is produced, this stuff enters your small intestine. Okay, after it enters your small intestine, it passes through the duodenum. This is where most of the duodenum is where most of the chemical digestion absorption of the food you eat is where it's going to be located. Okay, then once your small intestine is done with digestion, absorption of nutrients, your pancreas will get involved a little bit to help regulate the sugars that are absorbed, proteins and fats. The liver is also going to aid in helping break down some of those fats by producing bile. Then the large intestine is going to remove the E. coli found in your large intestine is going to remove vitamin K and other things that cannot be absorbed by your small intestine before the leftover waste gets excreted out the body.